Okay, okay then. Just stand for a moment. So if you're new to this, don't worry, we're not going to stand for hours and hours and hours. Just give yourself a chance to feel what it's like to stand supported by the ground, supported by your legs. If it helps you, take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And just give yourself a chance to feel what it's like with this pull of gravity through your body, drawing you down towards the ground. See if you can just allow your hips to settle a little. So this is the rooting down, and nothing in Tai Chi is purely physical, but obviously there's a physical element to this, just allowing gravity to draw on your hips, soften your knees a little bit. But at the same time, all of these things will bring in just a slight sense of just a slight sense of stilling in your thoughts. So just as gravity's drawing your hips down to the ground, so following that pathway through your body as much as you can will kind of draw your thoughts in. One of the classic writings about Qi has this very simple phrase in that we're urged to seek the stillness within the movement. It doesn't say we must be still all the time, because I'm not sure that that's even possible. But we seek it, and what happens is with our thoughts, sometimes they can feel a bit like sort of bees on a flower bed, constantly moving, taking off and landing, taking off and landing. But it's those moments of landing that we want to really sort of witness and get a sense for how that is happening. This center part of the body could be said to be a good focal point for that stillness, but for our thoughts to quieten and for our body to quieten, there needs to be some kind of framework. And so our posture and our movements can begin to provide that framework. And again, this is not to suggest that there's no physical element involved in this. Of course there is. But we want to move from the center part of the body. So just turning gently in your hips, letting your arms hang down from your shoulders. Noticing that when you turn in your hips, the shoulders move, and your shoulders move, your arms will follow. And this is a very simple way of noticing how movement happens in the body. That I could stand here and move my arms around, but my shoulders will very quickly get tired. What I can do with this is if I move in the middle of my body, then I'm in a way distributing the effort, because my back is involved, my spine is involved, the front of my body is involved, not just my shoulders and my arms. And our arms at this point are just very, very loose. We're not trying to make any particular shape with them. We do make the shapes with them, of course, but in the first instance, just registering how we are able to do this and what it feels like with that kind of looseness, that connectivity in our body is the important thing. We might liken it to the experience of, say, learning to ride a bike. You don't, if you've got any sense anyway, learn to ride a bike. If you've never ridden a bike before, you don't just get on the bike in the middle of a busy street and push the pedals down and hope for the best. You go somewhere quietly, maybe with somebody to help you, and just get used to the idea of moving around a little bit with the bike underneath you, and how that feels. And gradually we build it up. And regardless of how long you've been doing Tai Chi, whether it's your first class or your 101st, or you've been doing it for sort of like a day and a half or a decade and a half, it doesn't matter. We always go through this process of reminding ourselves of this. And for people with more experience, we attain a vocabulary, we attain a sort of store of ideas, images, techniques that that we can help to build on this feeling. But the stillness very much relates to the physical root, and the physical rooting down begins to allow your center of gravity to drop. The lower your center of gravity, the more stable you are. That's fairly obvious. The lower your center of gravity, the less strain potentially there is through much of your body. Your legs will feel as though they're working quite hard, and practice will help that, of course, because you'll condition the muscles of your legs. Don't hold your knees stiff. Don't be surprised if your legs get tired. But if I gave you a heavy box and I said hold it above your head and then relax your shoulders, it would be very, very difficult to do that. If I said lower the box down to there and then relax your shoulders, you're much more likely to do it. So if we allow our weight to drop down so that our upper body isn't so concerned with carrying the weight, if we can allow the weight of our head to flow down through the center of our body towards the ground, for instance, then there's going to be less reason for strain and stiffening in, say, our shoulders and neck. Doesn't mean that that's just going to automatically go away, but having taken away one of the major factors, we can then perhaps find a little bit of space. Feel as though there's support from your skeleton, that when you're in line and when you're not asking the skeleton to hold that heavy box up above its shoulders, then you're more likely to feel that support, and again less likely to maintain tightness and stiffness in your body. And without that tightness, without that stiffness, it's a bit like wearing a pair of shoes. As the shoes become worn and more, they've kind of adjusted to the shape of your foot. So you're more likely to be able to wiggle your toes around or something like that. And so these factors, the alignment of our body with the pull of gravity, the dropping of our center of gravity, helps to create space for movement. The external movement that we can see, and the internal movement, the corresponding patterns of muscle movement, tissue change, extension and contraction within the body, and this sense of a connection, a flow, so that what happens in a hip has an almost immediate effect on, say, a shoulder or something like that. So this in its turn takes us closer to this notion of energy, movement, flow, however you care to think of it within the body. And this is one of the outcomes, and one of the things that we would aspire to in Tai Chi and Qigong, and its connection with Chinese medicine, is to harmonize, to restore the flow of that energy through the body. Realize that all of these are aspirations. They're things that I'm certainly, after 40 years doing Tai Chi, still working on, still cultivating, hopefully getting better at. So it's not, although this is a useful kind of approach to start off with, it's also the approach that we really want to maintain. So people with more experience actually, you could argue that every time you practice, whether in a class or on your own, you actually go through for a few moments or a few minutes even the same process that you go through in your first class. You re-establish these qualities with the aim of them becoming regular habits. You may notice things like a rhythm in the movement developing. I come close, I don't know if you can hear it on the microphone. Notice how my hands are making a noise as they strike the sides of my body. I'm not trying to make that noise, I'm not going, I'm turning, and because my arms are heavy, and because ideally nothing is restricting their movement until they touch my body, then there'll be a sound. Now, just moving from that to something more structured in your arms and your hands, turn your hands palm out, raise up a little bit, and don't have your hands too high, no higher than the shoulder, but maybe even lower down. Elbows are hanging down. You may even want to imagine that somehow there's a cord from the ceiling around your wrist, holding your wrist up. Trying to find a position for your hands that enables you to maintain that position without clenching, without tightening, gripping muscles in your back, shoulders, and arms. And again, trying to maintain the movement, aware of the brush of the air on your fingers. And remember that everything that we notice contributes to this quietening of our attention, this meditational element in Tai Chi, of drawing your attention into your body. And then just letting your arms hang down with your hands are shaped. From the side, this is the first slow exercise that we will do. Just rolling your weight forwards and backwards. I'm doing this quite big at the moment. And what will happen inevitably is that as I go forwards a long way, eventually gravity is going to pull me over. So I moderate the movement so that you should hardly see anything really, because really the area that I can move in without having to strain against the pull of gravity is between the ball of my foot on each side and the front part of my heel. And then eventually we begin to identify a central point. If I were to take this pole and if I let it swing over there, it's going to fall. If I let it swing over there, it's going to fall. If I'm not going to try and do this because it would take a long time, but if I could possibly find the right alignment for the pole, then in theory, if gravity is pulling it straight down, it will stay there. In practice, it's a bit uneven at the bottom. The floor is always going to be a bit uneven. So it's not worth trying. But the principle is, can we find that line with the pull of gravity? And just let our body come to rest as much as possible on that line. So that quality of stillness is integrated with what we refer to as central equilibrium in Tai Chi. The sense that there is a central point where, in theory, it's possible to stand without the same kind of stiffness and tightness that we often just habitually experience. And it can feel quite strange because it can feel slightly unnerving if you've spent the last 20, 30, 40 years of your life holding your shoulders up in the unconscious assumption that this is what's keeping you upright, and to go from this to this can actually feel as though you're about to fall over. So don't push hard on this. Just give yourself time to get used to it. Now, see if you can let your hips drop back a little bit more, sinking down and then pushing up. If you're able to do this, don't strain in your knees, but it will be strong in the muscles of your legs. You'll reach a point, probably fairly quickly to begin with, where you feel yourself being pushed up. Like in water, if you're in a swimming pool or the sea, if somebody pushes down on your shoulders, then you'll start to feel the water pushing back almost straight away. Or the traditional image of this is if you get a block of wood and you push it down into water, then eventually you start to feel a push upwards, a rising, expanding energy. So gravity draws us down, and that rising, expanding energy, hung is the Chinese term, moves us up, and eventually gravity overtakes and pushes down. So we're moving between these two powerful forces and letting them move us, not straining against them. Don't try to sort of go down and think, well, I'll go down a bit further to begin with. Again, people with more experience, you may just get that sense of extra release in but that will come in time. Imagine your fingers are stuck in mud, or that there's little elastic bands from the tips of your fingers to the floor, so that as you push up, they're slightly reluctant to move, and then as you go down, if they're in mud, they're being pushed down a little bit. So see if you can feel that by doing nothing with your arms, maintaining a position and using an image, you can begin to get a sense of movement. Once again, small changes in your body. You might feel that a finger is being sort of lengthened and then compressed, for instance. And it could be anywhere in your arm, shoulders. So there's an energy, if you like to think of it like that, that you can now begin to create a shape with. You imagine the ball in your arms, and push up. Turn your hands over as though they're resting on the ball, hips drop, shoulders drop, arms drop. Push up. I'm still doing this movement in my hips. And just be aware that we need to deliberately and consciously return our attention to our feet and our legs and our hips to counterbalance what is really, I suspect, an evolutionary tendency for human beings, which is to give more attention to our arms and our hands and the upper part of our body than to feet and legs. We often just almost forget that we've got feet there, unless there's a pain there, or our shoelaces come undone, or something like that. So to make sure that we retain that awareness of our whole body, including the soles of our feet and everything above them, we make a deliberate effort to register what's happening in our feet on a regular basis. The front of your body is supported by your back, so try not to stiffen up, pull your belly in and tighten your chest. And that internal movement, that flow, will begin to just gently permeate your upper body. Terms like the internal organs and tissues being gently bathed in energy I use to describe this feeling. And in time, you'll find that that bathing process, that flow, will start to ease areas that feel a bit stuck, a bit tight for whatever reason. Don't hurry that process. Changing now, still moving, sinking down and pushing up in your hips, but your arms now coming out to the side. This is the exercise, the wild goose. So quite a strong image, and one that you may find some kind of resonance with. And in doing so, you may find that there's a response in your body. Our bodies tend to be very responsive to images of one kind or another. So with the right image, we can actually begin to have a physical effect on the body. And then letting your hands drop down, feel the weight of your arms, and let your hands cross at the wrists, pushing up. Elbows being pushed out by the expansion in your body, so your fingers being drawn around in a nice smooth circle. This is parting the clouds. It's not a stretch, but it is an opening out and expanding, followed by a contraction. Move as far as you're comfortable moving. So if, for instance, I were doing this and I felt there was a kind of tightening in my back, or, behind my shoulder or something like that, the next time I'd be very careful as I approach that area. I might not even go that far if that seems appropriate, or I might see if I could find a way to Almost imagine that tightness resisting. I might check out my posture, position of my hand. So if, for instance, I was doing this, see how my now I can feel that tightness. Oh, maybe I can move my hand there. So there's as we become more aware of what's going on in our body, so does our potential for beginning to be a bit creative with changing things. But now go back to the first of these. Do these 3 movements in a little sequence. Rooting down. Turn your hands out. Don't rush the change. It's not the end of the world if you get it wrong or a bit behind. We go into the wild goose. And then parting the clouds. This helps to train our attention. We have to think a little bit more closely about what we're doing, and it can help to prevent us getting a little bit sort of spaced out by what we're doing. It's not uncommon for that to happen. And we can also begin to become very attuned to small changes in the responses within our body. And as we get more experience with this, that aspect of Tai Chi, the internal aspect, becomes more important. We recognize those small changes as being the building blocks of the bigger, more visible movements. One more time. One form of movement that you may notice is your breathing. Just let your breath come smoothly. Notice if there's any particular movements that aid that, but don't feel you have to keep to a breathing pattern unless you're, again, more experienced and you're somebody who's familiar and at ease with that. More important is just to feel that your breath is comfortable within your body. Now let your arms hang down, and the next time you push up, expanding on one side, the hand goes above the shoulder a little bit. Roll your fingers into a loose fist, rotate, and pull down. This is called dragon plucks the stars from the sky. And on the other side, trying to retain that sense of an internal awareness, partly to help keep your mind in your body and just that little bit quieter and less likely to drift away into all sorts of thinking processes. Partly so that we can begin to make more use of those smaller movements through this intent. Intent may be guided by a direct thought. I want my arm to do this. May be guided by an image. For those of you who have done this exercise before, it may be the memory of this exercise. Oh, I like this exercise. I remember how it feels. And we also begin to recognize that each movement, although sharing many common aspects with all of the movements, does also have its own unique sort of patterning within the body. One more on each side. As you come down now, just let your hips drop back a little bit, so you've still got that sense of a pull through your hips and your lower back. And we're aware that our body also has this tendency to resist that, to push back up. And now they're being held in balance. Hands to your sides, and then pushing up just a little above your head, or maybe not if that's not comfortable. palms up and then back down, bringing your hands all the way back, just patient until they arrive. Lift up again and push out sideways. And stay slightly in front of the body, not a long way in front, but not pulled behind. Try and keep a nice steady movement. There's often the temptation to speed up, or even to miss a particular stage. And the tendency in my experience is that going to happen on the returning movement. So once again, you pay particular attention to one aspect, which is this drawing in movement. This time, as you push out, turn again in your hips, and that will change the direction that your arms are moving in and then back. Your arms, relative to your shoulders, are in exactly the same place. And the other way, it's called pushing in 4 directions and back, and then pushing out to the sides. So we begin to realize that the center of our body, the area between our hips and our waist, the area that we're wanting to drop down towards the ground, is the part of the body, it's like the control room of the body. When I turn in one direction, my arms move in a particular way. When I turn in another direction, they move in a different way. This way, we maintain that sense of our arms being moved by our body, and our arms expressing the sum total of other movements coming through. That means there's less reason to strain in shoulders, arms, and hands. And the flow of the movement, that sense of the energy moving, will naturally permeate our arms. We don't have to make it happen. Notice as you turn, if you're reaching a point where things are beginning to tighten up, and see if in subsequent movements you can notice just before that's going to happen and stop there. Wanting to move more, to move further, is a worthy aim. But even if we do that in Tai Chi, or when we do that in Tai Chi, we would always be aiming to do so with respect to that bit of space in the body that I talked about earlier, so that even at its the fullest of the movement, the energy within the body has space to flow through. And then pushing out sideways. Let your hands drop down again, feeling the full weight of your arms, and then curving out, elbow slightly curved, so your hand swings up above your head in line with your nose, and then down. We often experience more movement within our body when we're less concerned with trying to move more on the outside of our body. Tai Chi and Qigong are known as internal arts, and that's one of the reasons why. There are other reasons. This is quite a strong movement I find on my shoulder, so be careful with this next stage. If you don't do it, if it's uncomfortable, you turn and bring your hand down. Turn in your hips and your waist. You let your upper body turn gently around the center line of your body. Ideally without restriction, which is quite difficult in this particular exercise. It's said to be like a weather vane blowing in a gentle breeze. Now, changing sides. Another image commonly used, and it's a very good one if it works for you, is to imagine that we're moving through water. a slight sense of resistance, the resistance that most of us are familiar with and are familiar with the idea that if we're stiff in water, it becomes harder work. So it encourages this softer quality in our movement, but also a stronger sense of connection, using more of our body for any one particular movement. Once again, this time, if it's comfortable, add in the turn. One is called circling palms for obvious reasons. Some of the movements have very evocative names, but not all of them. Let your arms hang down beside your body, let them rest for a while, and go back to this movement, sinking down and pushing up. The last two movements involve the rotation of horizontal rotation in the center of our body, and that moves our shoulders and our arms and so on and so forth. The next movement and the one after use also a vertical rotation. So be careful with your knees and your back. This time, as I go back, I push my hips forwards. Notice how my arms are just hanging down at the moment. I let my hips drop back, almost like I'm sitting into a chair, and I push up. Notice how when you allow your hips to drop back, and I say allow because it's gravity pulling them down, that when you do that, your head and your shoulders come up nice and smoothly. There's a key point, I think, in our posture, getting away from the idea that we have to strain simply to be upright. This time, as you push up, your arms come out and out, and as you sink your hips back, your shoulders go forwards, and your hands follow your shoulders. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Again, carefully, gently with knees and back. I'm doing the movements fairly big at the moment so that you can see the mechanics of what I'm doing. I'm fairly comfortable with that, but it could just be a small movement like this. You really want to be able to do this, maintain the focus here in the center of the body. Move as far as you're comfortable moving. This is not a competition, and there's plenty of time to begin to build these movements. And then hands in front of your hips and turn horizontally, and then push your hips back, and notice how that pushes your hands forwards. Turn again, and then let your hips drop back down and turn to the center. Do the same thing, but in the other direction. Turn horizontally, push your hips back. Notice how that draws your arms around in a movement that is increasingly circular. This is called polishing the table. If that image doesn't work for you, then you could imagine you've got a big ball here. One of these big blue balls they've got in gyms, and that ball just is rolled around. One more time, polishing the table. And then your arms drop down and just turning as before. Let your shoulders soften. In theory, we don't need to sort of strain in our shoulders. In practice, of course, we always do. Just letting your hands come back and see how it feels to just stand again. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And shake out. Good. These exercises are great exercises in their own right. For various reasons, help in our posture, helping to quieten our mind, and through all of that, the flow of energy and maybe specific things in some cases. The sense of connection in our body gives us a sense of our whole body. To borrow a phrase from modern computing, we defragment. It's almost like tidying up the body. We can often feel, and we sometimes say to people, "How I'm all over the place today. Mind and body just aren't in sync, and you can't get anything done." There's something very lovely about bringing body and mind together in the context of these exercises. They're also excellent preparation for the whole Tai Chi system, which often involve quite complicated exercises and martial practices and so on and so forth. But they do work very well as standalone. Recognize that if this is new to you, you are working physically. I think it's fair to say that in many ways, if we regard Tai Chi as a moving meditation, we may be able to sort of modify our approach to it and get a little bit more out of it. But you are still moving, so you should always take care and be prepared to build these movements up. So we're going to change the stance. This is sometimes referred to as the Wu Chi stance. Turn one foot out. Notice the width of the step. So if I get the pole again, and see that my feet, I'll just use the one pole, but if there was more than one, I would have parallel lines. If I can get it straight. So my left foot, the one on your right, is by the pole. I can imagine another line there. If I stand like this, it's almost like I'm trying to stand on the pole. It's always going to be more difficult. So this is a good posture, feet hip width apart, feet directly below your hips. Now I'm going to turn this foot out so you can mirror my movements, play around with the angle of this. And then I'm going to step forward with my other foot. Not a long step, shorter than normal, but wider perhaps than normal. Again, if I'm here, and again, it's like I'm trying to balance on a tightrope. So this gives us a good foundation for movement. We feel supported again, and that's important. When you don't feel supported, it's quite natural and normal to sort of stiffen up a little bit. So from the side, it looks like this, and beginning to transfer your weight. This is a movement from one foot to another. Again, people with more experience, hopefully you've got a sense of where that point of equilibrium is in your feet. Where did you find that alignment of your body? And those become very precise targets, shall we call them, for the movement of your weight. When you go forwards, you've got about no more than 60% of your weight in the front leg. When you go back, that could be as much as 70, but at the moment, not much more. And going back to the idea of the center line of the body, when I stand like this, that center line is upright. And when I start to move, it moves with me, hopefully, if we say glance at the camera. So what I don't want to do is to do something like this, to move from the top. It's a very common habit and one that we make good use of in ordinary walking, but that's not what we're trying to do. Imagine if you had a pile of books or something in front of you, or a couple of boxes, and they're in the way, and you wanted to slide them along the floor to get them out of the way. You would do so by moving the bottom box. You wouldn't just push on the top box and expect the bottom to move with it. So once again, we want to be very aware of what's happening in our feet and our legs, and to use our feet and our legs to actively initiate the movement, maintaining our line with the pull of gravity. An excellent exercise for legs and knees, this one, and to show us how we can begin to take these ideas of alignment and rooting down and everything that comes out of that into something perhaps a bit more dynamic and a bit more kind of significant for the rest of our lives. This time I go into my back foot and imagine somebody pushing down on this hip, and the response is for my toes, front toes to come up, and a bit more of my weight drops down through my back foot. I go forwards, my back knee pushes forwards, again, my back hip drops down, my heel comes up, and again, more of my weight going in to the front foot this time. So that 60%, 70% distribution gradually begins to increase until I've got the vast majority of my weight flowing down through my supporting leg. I'm upright over the leg. So the combination, my center of gravity dropping or not resisting the pull of gravity, yield to the pull of gravity, and having the alignment in my body. So for instance, if I go forward and my head's facing forwards, I lift up my heel, I'm going to be pulled forwards. But to the degree that I've got my posture correct as I move, moving from the ground, then I can maintain a sense of stability. And with that in place, I can begin to move my foot. Step back and out, and forwards and out. Make sure that you return to the hip width and begin to just get a sense of knowing where you want your foot to go. It won't always get there. So, don't be afraid of making mistakes. We can learn from them, with the proviso that you want to maintain your safety. If stability is an issue for you, which of course for many people it can be, then I want you just doing this next to a wall, maybe with your hands just lightly touching the wall. This will give you a sense of security, and you're more likely, therefore, to soften, to release, and to drop your center of gravity. If you feel that you're about to fall, inevitably you will stiffen up. So we gradually learn a sense of confidence in these principles. If you've done this many times, I would still recommend sometimes touching the wall, using some kind of support. You may surprise yourself with some of the insights that you get from that. Now, come back to the original stance, and we'll do the same thing with your other foot forwards. Turn the foot out, step forwards, keeping the width of the step, front toes pointing forwards, upper body as much as possible facing forward, but a slight deviation from that, unless you've been in one of my classes where I've offered information about how to correct that, I wouldn't bother for the moment, because it could involve straining your knees or your back. Remember, 60% when you're in the front leg, 70% when you're in the back leg. Try not to tighten the joints of the legs, particularly knees. Just notice if you are. And again, this is where, regardless of how you've been doing, but my knees tightening up. Using the support can actually show you how you can release more. And beginning to raise your toes and your heel. Stepping in, then whichever direction you've got room, take the step, stepping forwards a little bit. Each time you bring your foot in, just do a little posture check. Are my hips in line? Are my shoulders above my hips? Or have I sort of leant over somehow? Remember, old habits of movement aren't just going to go away easily. Some of those habits we've had most of our lives for all sorts of reasons. Change direction if you haven't done so or already. What we're really trying to do is to learn new habits, ones that are hopefully more useful to us. Don't force yourself to not do something. It doesn't work. Check out. There are all sorts of reasons why we move habitually. It could be a cultural thing, it could be what we've been taught, it could be something to do with your lifestyle. You've done a particular type of work, done the various activities in your life. Many of those things leave their imprint on our body. If you've had some kind of illness or you have a condition that has affected your posture and so on. So all of these things are things that will affect how you move. And it's worth considering that actually whether they're useful or not, they have got you here. So they're worthy of some respect, even if we've decided, no, I don't want to hold my shoulders like that and like that anymore. That's a fair enough thing to do, but don't sort of try and push away, because you're actually just going to add to the tension. And that movement, that movement of our weight becomes another way of generating movement, energy, power, strength within the body. In the parallel stance, we were sinking down and pushing up, sinking down and pushing up. Now we're no longer sinking down and up, but we're still using gravity. We're sinking into one leg and another. So we're using the legs to move the rest of the body. And the order of the movement is going to be sort of feet and legs, excuse me, feet and legs, then the central trunk of our body, followed by our arms. And once again, just remind you, we are hardwired to lead with our arms, to pay more attention to these things because they're very useful for us. So it requires a definite conscious effort that, no, I'm going to concentrate on my feet first. So have your right foot forwards, mirror my movements. I'm going to show you from the side first of all. Start with your weight in your back leg. Move your weight forwards. Notice how my hands stay behind, and I may notice various sort of movements or changes in the upper part of our body. As I arrive in the front of my body, I release those changes and let my arms swing through. It's almost like somebody has hold of my fingers. My weight moves, my shoulders move, my arms follow. My weight moves, my shoulders move, my arms follow. I feel as though I'm moving in water. But whether that works as an image or not, the sheer lack of effort in our arms, we don't have to strain in our arms, it's not this or anything like that, naturally begins to let our arms flow more. This is a movement called fisherman cast a net. If, like me, you haven't cast many nets in your life, then maybe you could think of throwing a sheet over a bed, or rolling a ball along the floor, or rolling out a carpet, something like that. And the more we can bring our attention and our intention to the movements, the more complete the movement is. I like the description of these arts as intentional movements. But remember that intention and attention are linked. It's hard to do something with intention if your mind is elsewhere. If you've ever walked into a room in your house or walked down the road and gone into a particular shop and thought, oh, I didn't mean to be here. I thought I was going to do something else. Or if you walk down the road and then thought, oh, what was I going to buy? That kind of thing. That's where attention and intention separate. So fishermen cast a net. Notice that your arms are swinging. They go down and up. So there's a little curve there. This time, as you come back, bring your hands into your sides. Drop the palms of your hands down. And as you go forwards, let the movement from the back foot like a wave on the beach, pushing your hands away. And then as it withdraws, pulling them back. This is called a pushing wave. Don't think of lifting your arms, because maintaining the shape of your arm, it's almost like your hip is pushing on your elbow and your hand will come up quite naturally. This has a stronger feel to it, a more directed, more intentful feel. You're actually pushing against something, perhaps. Think of, if you've ever done it, those times when maybe you pushed a boat out into a canal or into a river. And just remember, don't go too far. You don't want to fall into the river. So the stronger quality in Tai Chi is an outcome of this integration of three elements. Our body, our posture, the mechanics of the movement, the flow, the movement, the energy itself, and our awareness, our minds. This time go forwards, and as you come back and your hands go down, turn to your left. Notice that brings your hands through the curve. Let them come up to shoulder height or maybe a bit below. Turn both hands palm down, go forwards and turn, and just let your hands swing down, brushing, almost touching your hip. Turn and they swing up again to about shoulder height. Move your weight back. So your arms are now moving in a circular fashion that actually describes a sort of sideways figure of eight, or something like the infinity sign that is used in mathematics and physics. So your arms are creating the shape for the movement to express itself. We're using the whole body, weight moving from one foot to another, turning in the center of our body. It's in that movement, move our arms. Shake out. So let's do those three movements with the other foot forwards. Remember, keep the width of your stance. Weight back, fisherman cast a net. Just notice any areas of tightness or stiffness in your body. Now change into pushing wave. One more. Go forward. Add one thing into the movement, which is the turn in your center. Feel how your arms begin to follow and build the movement up from there. Don't let your arms stray too far from your body. This time, turn your front foot out just a little bit. Go forwards, and as you turn, raise your back heel, bring the foot in, step forwards, and then move forwards. Or backwards if that's easier for you. Depends where you've got the room. And then changing direction. Take your time. Once more, just bring your feet parallel. Shake out. Good. So just rubbing your hands together. And then the pads of your fingers tapping lightly over your face. Quite rapid. Take that movement over your head and down to your neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Winch your back. Around your hips. Down the outside of your legs and up the inside. And then lightly on your belly. And onto the upper part of the chest. So enjoy Tai Chi Passion at the end. We return to the beginning. Everything works in circles in Tai Chi. So Embrace Tiger Return to Mountain is the name of the last exercise. Just sinking down again in the parallel stance. Push up, arms coming out to your sides. And then wrapping around as though they're going to hold a ball against your chest. Feel your hips beginning to yield to the pull of gravity as your hands come in, and then sinking down back into this rooted quarter position. Embrace Tiger, return to the mountain. One more time. And your hands come down. Close your eyes if it helps. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths to finish. And shake out. Thank you for watching, everybody.